everyone. Welcome to the Self-Awareness Journey podcast. I'm Melissa Albers.
And I'm JJ Parker. This podcast is for seekers, seekers of happiness and joy, seekers of a centered approach to success in life, seekers of their true, authentic selves.
Get ready for some real talk on everything from anxiety, emotions, and habits to love, compassion, and forgiveness. We know you'll be challenged and enlightened by this conversation. We're so glad you're here. Let's dive in.
So, I play tennis a lot.
Yes.
Right? Tennis is my thing.
Tennis is your thing.
And for like a very, very long time, I've played tennis with like the same group of guys on Tuesday morning.
Yeah. You've talked about
like
those.
My Tuesday,
group.
my Tuesday morning tennis group.
Peeps.
And for quite a while, like, I don't know, 8 years or something, we play at 6. We start at 6 a.m. So we got to get up at like 5:15 in the morning.
Okay.
So the gig was you get up early in the morning, you show up to the club, we hit tennis balls for an hour and a half, then we go to the locker room, shower up, and everyone basically just like goes off to work. It was actually awesome because it didn't impact family time or work time.
Oh, I thought you were going to say you didn't actually have to talk to anyone.
Oh, yeah, no. And it was kind of like, it was so early. It's so early.
God,
you don't
JJ.
really want to like sit and chit chat in the locker room. And we all had to get to, generally had to get to work.
Right.
And and it was like the best dude relationship situation there.
Again,
or we just
because
like
nobody had to talk.
Yeah. We just came, we played tennis, we showered up, and we left. And no one knew anything about anyone else. And it was awesome.
Oh, dear. I would hate that.
Except one of the guys, Tom, who he and I started getting a little bit more buddy, right? So we'd talk a little bit more and get to know each other a little bit more because we had kids the same age and all that. And so that was fun. And so one day he and I are talking and I just like made this observation that like a bunch of the guys we were playing with were older than us. So like, we're like in our mid 40s, but they were like all kind of like in their mid 50s or pushing 60.
Totally different life space.
Yeah. And we noticed that like one after another over a span of like a couple of years, like we're getting divorced. Like clockwork.
I didn't think you were going to say that.
No. Yeah. I was like, wait, that guy got divorced? Wait, that guy's getting divorced? Like, what is going on here with this little group of people?
Yep.
And so Tom and I started talking about it. I'm like, I wonder if like there is a change in life stage, like when your kid, all these guys, like their kids like moved out, got through college and moved out, and they're back to empty nesters, and it was like dominoes falling. Yeah, I just couldn't believe it. So Tom and I together were like, we should try to figure out how to make that not happen in our lives.
What a good idea, JJ.
Yeah, so that was the thing. Like actually, Tom and I first bonded over was this idea that what we should try to do is work now to set ourselves up for like
to not do that,
to not get divorced in like 10 years from now.
Well, me being at that age and a female, I can tell you that I think that's really, really true. I think that happens a lot. And, as I've just been reflecting on this, as you were talking, there's a lot of stages in our lives where things shift, as it relates specific to couplehood. When you date, you have no level of responsibility towards each other. And then as you get more serious and you get married and there's all of a sudden this huge level of responsibility to each other. Some people don't do well during that shift. And some people don't make it through that shift.
Yeah, there's lots of stories where young couples or newlyweds actually get divorced not too far after they get married.
Exactly. And so like if you just think about this thing that you're talking about and you look at it in the life cycle of a couplehood, there's a lot of key elements in that couplehood's shifting reality that is an exit ramp for people.
So what are other points What do you think would
Yeah.
be other significant inflection points that would cause
Yeah.
that?
Having children.
Yeah.
Having children's a huge one. Well, actually, even break it down, not be so general. Having your first baby.
Mm.
Because a lot of times there will be different expectations about what that's supposed to look like as a new family for each spouse. Different levels and roles of responsibility. Each spouse can have very different ideas. And I think that's a really natural place where there's huge discord. Going from, this sounds really minor, but going from renting something to owning something. Again, that level of responsibility shifts. And there's a huge disconnect sometimes with people because their expectations don't match each other's. Getting a different job, where all of a sudden you may have a greater level of responsibility, or your spouse has a greater level of responsibility, or the culture or environment of the new job is completely different. And so that spouse starts to act different. I just think that, I think there's probably countless times.
Yeah,
in
but those would be
couplehood.
some of the big ones, right?
Yeah.
And then my example, right? The empty
Yeah.
nester syndrome.
Yep.
That's another big one.
Yeah. Oh, it's a huge one. I think the funny thing about that piece, though, is that I think there's a number of little micro cuts that happen in relationships that, if not tended to, it can just be like the death of 1,000 cuts, as they say. Where everything's kind of going along. It might not be great, but you have sort of a level of malaise about the relationship, or you don't care for it. You don't put it in the same level of priority that you could. Notice I didn't say should. But so by the time something significant happens in that relationship, there's so much fatigue.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. You're just kind of worn out. You're just tired.
Yeah. I've seen it a lot, and I remember when Mitch and I were married a number of years, and I had this author that I was really high on. Her name was Christiane Northrup. She was a OBGYN author of women's books, and she had both a Western philosophy about healthcare as well as a really strong Eastern philosophy about healthcare. And I just thought she was so awesome, and she was so practical about everything. And she always talked about her husband. And anyway, when she hit about mid-50s, all of a sudden she was divorced. And she shifted her gear, and I think she even started writing. She wrote a book on that too. But just that's exactly what happened. It was like, nope, empty nest. I can't do this with you anymore. And they ended up divorcing. So I mean, I think it happens in some pretty big examples as well of people that are very healthy and great-minded, and
So, yeah, that's an interesting thing. It's like, I mean, when you have kids, like a very common thing is you have a common mission, right?
Yeah.
Is to get your kids grown up and launched. So staying together during that period of time, I think I've heard a lot, like, we're just kind of staying together for the kids. You hear that.
Yeah.
And then you're right. By the time that's not required anymore, right? That's not the mission anymore. It's easy to just move separate ways.
Well, and I think, if you just take it a little step deeper, kind of like how we think about our spouses, like in a healthy marriage, in a healthy couplehood, there are some key practices that are helpful, to keep a couple tight. And oftentimes we just are tired. We don't want to make the extra effort with our spouse because we just think, well, they're always there. Like, what's going to happen?
So, like, what are those things? Let me get my notebook.
Actually, you know what? I do have, my friend and I were talking about this, and she had a list of 20 things for healthy marriages.
No way, really?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. And I was like, and by the way, I totally forgot that I had this until just this moment for realsies. But as I'm looking for it on my phone, I was just going to say, I think the key thing here is you get used to thinking a certain way,
Mm.
about all things. And I think the way you think about your relationship is no different. You get used to thinking about things a certain way, and it becomes so habitual that you don't recognize that it's falling. These are okay. So like these are. I'm not going to read all of them because there's 20, but I'm going to read a couple because they're pretty good.
Yeah.
Some of them are kind of obvious. Like number 1, choose to love each other even in those moments when you struggle to like each other. Love is a commitment, not a feeling. Isn't that interesting? My grandmother and my grandfather, who I've talked about a million times on the pod, were ordained ministers, both of them. And I remember my grandma used to say, love is not about being in love your whole life. Love is about learning how to live with someone else. And I was always like, that is so negative. When I was a teenager with big, hearts for eyes.
Yeah.
How could you say that? Anyway, another one, always answer the phone when your husband or wife is calling. When possible, try to keep your phone off when you're together with your spouse. Okay, just right here for a moment.
Yeah.
Who does that?
Who keeps their phone off?
I don't know anybody that does. Not one person.
Well, that drives me crazy, so.
Yeah, we might have to talk about that in another pod. Make time together a priority. Budget for a consistent date night. Time is the currency of relationships. I love that. So consistently invest time in your marriage. Am I going too fast? Are you getting bored?
No, I'm thinking about all of like how I don't do some of those things.
Oh, I know. Well, I think the point of this conversation, like, let's not be judgy about ourselves.
Yeah.
Don't do that, because I just think everybody will always go to that. And I'll tell you something, the minute you feel like you're being judged or you feel guilty about something, you're not listening anymore. Because then it's painful then.
Yeah.
It's painful.
Yeah.
So when I read this, I did the exact same thing that you're doing now. Then the second thing I did was print it off and give it to Mitch. Like, see? But then what I did...
Was that on the list?
No. Do not print this list and give it to your spouse. But then the third thing I did was said, you know what we should do? We should independently, on a scale of like 1 to 5, 1 being the best, 5 being the worst, we should each look at this list and rate how we think we are as a couple. Not me against you or you against me, but just, again, be on the same side of the table. And we haven't done that yet, but we're going to. Here's another really good one. Surround yourself with friends who will strengthen your marriage. Remove yourself from people who may tempt you to compromise your character.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like, we talk about friends, like making friends as adults. And when we're kids, we don't really choose our friends, they're more like geographical or school or activities.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Well, we do get the opportunity to choose our friends as adults. So
right.
Choosing ones that support what your goals are be important.
Right. Or certainly match your cultural norm in your marriage or your expectations of your life. What kind of life you have. Yeah. I like this one. Realize that a strong marriage rarely has 2 strong people at the same time. Isn't that a great one? It's usually a husband and wife taking turns being strong for each other in the moments when the other feels weak. Here's another really good one. Remember that marriage isn't 50-50. Divorce is. Marriage has to be 100-100. It's not splitting everything in half. But both partners giving everything that they've got. Yeah. It's hard to do this all the time.
For sure.
Actually, it's hard to do it most of the time.
Yeah, I agree.
But yeah, I could go on, and maybe I'll read a couple more here as we
I like
go.
these.
But yeah, I mean, they're really, really good. Give your best to each other, not your leftovers after you've given your best to everyone else. How many times you come home and you're just shot because you've been with everybody else doing things all day, talking, working, and then you get home and you're just wiped out.
Yeah, that's most of the time.
It is most of the time. I think that's true for all of us. And I think there's a lot of this in society today. Everything's really amped up. It takes more energy just to be yourself, I think, today more than ever. Here's another good one. Just exactly what you were talking about. Don't put your marriage on hold while you're raising your kids, or else you'll end up with an empty nest and an empty marriage.
I think that one's so hard to do. There's so much blocking and tackling with kids.
I know.
And
Especially
emotions with kids, it's hard to keep it all up.
Yeah, especially at the age of kids that you have, JJ. I think, and I'm just reflecting because both Mitch and our kids are launched now, but junior high and high school were actually junior high was the worst stage for us because the kids were older. They were more adult-like in their thinking and how they operated. But they still needed us as much as when they were really young because they didn't drive. They're getting thrown into a bunch of difficult situations with their peer groups at these ages, and it's harder. Everything's just hard at that stage.
Yeah, one of the things I remember is there's always like problems to solve, and even with like kids, they bring all sorts of problems to solve.
I know.
I remember this like one quote that was really helpful. It's like, it's not you against your partner, it's the two of you against the problem.
That's really good.
What it can so easily be if like there's something we need to solve, and I've got an opinion, and she's got an opinion, and they're not the same, and then that turns as not trying to solve the problem, but us like trying to convince each other the other one's right.
Exactly.
So it's like us against us, so us against the problem.
Right. Which happens all the time.
All the time. It's easy.
It's so easy. I'm really quite good at that. I'm so good at it.
Poor Mitch.
Poor Mitch. Oh, BS. That's what everybody says. Poor Mitch. Ha. Yeah, I don't know. Here's another one. Now, this one, some of these are a little more challenging, or in difficult situations. But when your husband or wife breaks your trust, give them your forgiveness instantly. This will promote healing and create the opportunity for trust to be rebuilt. You should be quick to say, "I love you. I forgive you. Let's move forward." Now, there's a should in here. I really hate when any advice says shoulds. And I don't think this is always easy.
Yeah.
I have tested our marriage in places where it's been I'm sure, very difficult for Mitch to forgive me. And I know he's done that with me too. And I think just, again, sometimes it's just the repetition of a person being themselves that you get worn out on. Do you know what I mean? And your spouse probably says the exact same thing about you. It's like the repetition of my personality where I consistently do something that's annoying for Mitch. I'm not doing it to be annoying. I'm just being my personality when I'm not aware. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
And I think you get kind of worn down in those situations with the marriage. And then if you have something else that you can focus on, it's easier to do that. And I think that's where things start to fray.
There's that other like phrase, like you should choose a spouse who you can like, what was it like, stand them chewing.
Oh, oh yeah. Well, Mitch would still be single today. Yeah.
Well, some of that you're talking about, like this, like forgiving people or going through like difficult periods, like sometimes like a resentment can build up.
Yeah.
Right. And that's really hard. That's hard when there's some, like, you start building up that bank of resentment, and then how do you get over that?
And you know what? It is, when you're first in that, just being honest, it sometimes feels really good to be full on resenting someone. You just like, you get very self-righteous about things. I'm just being honest. I don't want to live in this world myself, but I'm just being honest with emotions. Like, sometimes you get mad at your spouse and it feels pretty dang good to just be mad because you're just sick of it. You're sick of them. You're sick of all the things. And it feels kind of good to be sort of self-righteous about it, but it isn't very helpful.
Yeah. If I was ever right, that sounds like it would be fun.
Oh, I'm right all the time. It's so fun. Okay, I have one other thing that I remember, though, that I think is kind of interesting. When I think another place that it's easy for couples to break down, especially during major change where things are a little unstable, is when the couple gets into a fight or an argument, the way in which they attack the argument. There is a common way of addressing a problem that's healthy, and then there's a really common unhealthy way. And I know this from therapy, and I think I've always remembered this from years and years ago. It's so amazing, and it's pretty simple. It's like when you start to get mad at your spouse or when you get into a fight, do you attack the situation that you're arguing with? Is like that's really where you want to stay, is staying in the discussion, in your thinking patterns, in your beliefs, focused on the situation at hand. But I think when we start to get those 1,000 cuts going, pretty soon we aren't attacking the situation, we're attacking the relationship.
Yeah,
And how does
you
that look? Always,
Yeah.
Other couples don't do this, so that kind of language. And then the third attack, which is the most critical, is attacking the person. So in those three scenarios, it really, and I really think it's such common sense, but we don't think about it like that. We get mad and it's really easy to start attacking the person's character. Whether we're saying it to them or not, just how we judge and how we feel and what the story we're telling ourselves.
Yeah. We're talking about a little bit like expressing like our frustrations. On the other side would be not expressing them.
Yes.
It's equally as damaging, right? But so many people
very
just
so.
Stay quiet, they'll be a good partner by just putting up with this and dealing with it. And that really starts collecting stamps.
For both people, though, don't you think?
Maybe.
You might think you're doing it. I think that the person that's not saying anything may be thinking they're doing a favor, but the other person not being talked to can often feel left out, closed off, judged.
Yeah, because if you're holding
alone.
all that in, you're probably like being more guarded or
closed.
Yeah, closed or retracting. Yeah.
Which is a way of controlling a situation too, by the way. Yeah. It's complicated, isn't it?
It is. So what are we going to do about it?
Well, I think we've given,
There's some good
just even
ideas
in today.
there.
Yeah. I just, I think there's a million things that we can do about it, but I think the one really big critical thing that I always keep in mind, because we've been married 30 years now, my overall goal is to stay married to Mitch and his to stay married to me. We know these things, right? And so as a result, I've started to put down some of the measly, little piddly stuff that used to really bother me, or I could judge. Because when our kids left the house, we were sitting there looking at each other and like, wow, it's just us again. It's a good thing we like each other still, But we've taken time to make sure that we don't get too far off track before we kind of bounce it back into the centered spot, the relationship.
Yeah.
But I also know people who just like at the beginning of this podcast, a client once said that he was looking at his wife across the table and he thought to himself, I can't look at this face the rest of my life. And I just think that's so sad,
Yeah. Well, so it sounds like everyone who's in a relationship, a long-term relationship, should
Did this
keep
make you feel
working
better
on it.
or worse?
I don't know.
Well, I think this is a big, big, big conversation. I don't think we can do a kitschy top 5 steps kind of thing. But I do really think that long-term relationships are a lot more steady. It's a bigger boat. It doesn't swamp as easy. And it takes quite a bit to swamp it, meaning a long time. It takes a long time to fill it with water. So you have lots of chances to even get a Dixie cup and start taking little bits of water out. Yeah. And with a long-term approach, I think it's a lot more, I don't know, it's a lot more possible.
Yeah. Well, maybe like you're going to go talk to Mitch about your list. Maybe we'll go talk to Amber about your list.
You want me to send it to you?
Yeah, you should send it to me.
To you. Okay.
and probably just, like a conversation with yourself and a conversation with your partner about, what your goals are maybe 20, 30 years after you first, got married.
Yeah, I like that idea.
A regroup. Like, what are we doing here?
Well, the other thing, JJ, truly is I think, when you find yourself in these lulls in your relationship, whatever kind of relationship you have, when you find yourself in these lulls, what if you don't get overly discouraged and judgmental? What if you just said, this lull doesn't feel good. I've been here before with this person. I'm going to try something different. Like, let's have an agreement that we're not going to look backwards and we're not going to ruminate on that stuff. Let's just make an agreement where we do try to find 1 or 2 key things that we can shift right now. And as we start moving towards this new way of being, and when your kids leave your house, you have no idea what that's going to be like because you've never, ever been there before.
Yeah.
You've never had a house that had kids in it and now doesn't. It'll be new.
Yeah. You know what our neighbors did?
They bought a Ferrari?
No, worse. Their kids moved out, and as soon as they moved out, they got a puppy.
Oh my God.
Like, you guys didn't get a puppy when your kids were little. What if they move out? The second the kids move out, they got a dog.
Oh my gosh. They weren't done parenting yet.
So there's that technique. Everyone can try that.
Okay.
We are not trying that in the Parker house.
I don't think we're going to at the Albers place either. I've got enough going on with dogs.
Did you enjoy this episode? Please go to your favorite podcast platform to subscribe, rate, and leave a review so others can discover it as well.
Growing self-awareness is a lifelong journey, and there's always further to go. And it's better when we're all in it together. Please think of someone you know who could benefit from hearing today's conversation and share this episode with them. We can't thank you enough for listening. Until next time, happy exploring, seekers.